Welcome to our third installment of Talking Business, a series of conversations with small business owners. My name is Angela Atkinson, and I'm the director of the North Metro Small Business Development Center. And for those of you who may be joining us for the first time, the idea behind this series of conversations was this recognition as we're helping a lot of small business owners navigate these really challenging times, that there's a lot of information out there, education on how to get SBA funding and different types of the PPP loan, different types of assistance. But we were sensing that it may be helpful for small business owners to hear from their peers, other owners of businesses who are figuring their own way through this unknown territory and sharing their story, really, in effect. So I think that when we're all quarantined and alone, it can feel isolating and like you're the only one who's really struggling at times. And so hopefully these series of conversations will help business owners feel like there's some camaraderie and some, other folks in the trenches who are trying to navigate these times. So just very quickly, with the SBDCs we're based in Westminster. They're all over the country. We provide free one-on-one consulting to small businesses. And we also provide workshops. So if you go to our website, North Metro SBDC, you can book a free session with folks like Adrian, who can sit down with you and go through your business model, help you with funding, et cetera. So no strings attached. That's what we do. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Adrian Hovey, who is one of our lead consultants at the SBDC, and he'll introduce himself and give a little bit of his background. And we're just really excited that Naomi Boylan is here and giving a bit of her time. And Naomi owns a mediation service, so she's going to tell us a bit about the challenges in mediation and negotiations, and also her journey with her own small business. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Adrian, and just note that there are questions that you all can ask in the panel, and we will hold for Q&A at the end. So take it away, Adrian.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Angela. A wonderful intro. So I'm Adrian Hovey, and I'm a lead consultant, like Angela said, over there at the SBDC. And I've been helping folks build business plans for almost 9 years now. And I've done that through my alma mater, and now I do it with the Small Business Development Center. One of the great things about it is, I get to meet people from the community with businesses who are building businesses, and really kind of understand what motivates them and help them, move their business to the next level. So it's very exciting. And now we're able to take that energy and that activity and reach out to the community and connect you guys with other small business owners. And that's why we're here today with Naomi, who's got a practice over in Nevada. And I'll turn it over to let her tell you guys about that. And then she and I will talk a little bit about some of those things Angela said and about being resilient. So go ahead and introduce you and your business there, Naomi.
Thank you, Adrian. So thank you for having me. My name is Naomi Boylan. I own a mediation practice specializing in family and domestic relations in the city of Arvada. I practice all over Colorado. And so my journey my journey started roughly a year ago here in Arvada by opening up brick and mortar for my practice. And so one of the things that I do is I do pre-decree and post-decree issues, as well as parental allocation and some supervision for families, as I'm a mediator and a parent coordinator here in the state.
Great. All right, thank you. And one of the reasons why, Naomi, we wanted to have you on the program, and I think one of the things that a lot of the listeners are going to want to see and learn from you, not only how your business has progressed, but how you've been able to use some of those some of those skills in new ways, as the COVID thing has played out. So I guess first, the natural starting place would be, you mentioned you converted to brick and mortar. That must have been a big step for your business. So tell us kind of what the state of things were at the beginning of this year, around January. So what was it like? What was happening?
So end of year January and coming into it, I was busier than ever. My practice was rapidly growing. Financially, we were extremely sound. I was done renting conference rooms and traveling to attorneys' offices and, just non-MySpace spaces. So back in October, actually, I signed with a local business in Arvada, a lease to have an office in a shared workspace where I have private space and conference room access. So in January, things were going great. I was booking vacations and business was rolling in faster than I could have it. And I was strongly considering contracting out to a second family mediator that I either trained myself or came from my alma mater, just so that I knew that we had similar training. February was amazing. March, things started to get a little bit like, oh, I don't know. I did the risky thing and I went on a vacation, like that one last go, because I was scared they were going to shut those borders down. And I came back into the country 2 days before they closed the borders. I came back in with a notice from the Supreme Court that they were shutting courts down. So for about the first week after that, that was March 17th, for about 7 to 10 days after that, my phone stopped ringing. I was not allowed back in my office because I had traveled internationally, and prior to the state shelter in place, they made a decision that anyone who had been on an airplane had to be away for 14 days. In that 14 days, the shelter in place went into effect, and there was a rapid, and when I mean rapid, I say overnight, discussion and decision about the way things were going to run. The Supreme Court issued an order that they would only deal with criminal matters and emergency things. That was very scary to me because I rely mostly on fresh and new divorces or post-decree matters that are non-emergency. And so I didn't know what that was going to look like. And I guess for lack of a better term, I had to start really like thinking outside of the box. Like, what am I going to do to survive this? Because there was no end sight in date. Am I going to have to move my office back home? Am I going to be able to meet with people? Am I at the mercy of the Supreme Court reopening? What is conflict going to look like? What kind of conflict are we going to receive? Where are we going to, we have to alter and modify our boundaries for the kind of caseload that we're going to take. And I say we because ultimately my decisions were going to impact the business that I rent from and also my family. And so there was a big rapid shift and adjustment in my industry about how we were going to take on a caseload and what that was going to look like.
Yeah, so you said a bunch of interesting things there. And we've heard some of this from other business owners, and it's not just your own business, right? There's this broader network of impact that's happened. In your case, Supreme Court says, hey, the court system is only going to operate this way, and that's not something you can control. And then that's got this trickle down effect where you've got a lease in place, you have to manage that, and you have to understand that existing clients are going to have to manage their things in process differently. And it's interesting because a lot of other businesses we've talked to, we had someone with a salon last week and a brewery 2 weeks ago. They're facing similar things, right? It's not just impacts to their bottom line. They're seeing, even if they can open up, then it's only going to be 1 or 2 people allowed inside and things like that. So that's pretty interesting. I wanted to ask you about that. So you've been personally impacted, your business has, and those systems around you. How about your peers, right? Some of those other folks you work very closely and collaborate with in the community, like what's happening with them? Have you seen anything interesting?
Yes. So in my industry, I'm an oddity because I'm not an attorney and I'm not a retired judge. And that's typically what you see in my industry are it's a dual type profession. They're practicing law and they're mediating, or it's a judge that retires and then they go on to mediation. I specifically went into this for alternative dispute resolution. So for lack of a better term, confidentiality for us is number one. We could get in a lot of trouble if things are not confidential, so we had to work around those boundaries. And 2, technology and how to keep people safe as far as their information goes technically while we're working with them. And then in addition to that, getting them to trust the system. Not everyone is comfortable with technology. And so ironically, I have peers. I have one peer like specifically that I'm thinking about, she is very much like an in-person, in-face mediator, and she works in corporate mediation. So she works in business mediation, and having to go on, I think initially the thought process was, is we're going to wait it out. Like all the memberships and the affiliations that I were with, they were not going to stand behind this new like wave of technology that was coming. A couple weeks in, everyone changed their mind. Like we were going to have to get technical. And so the way I've seen it impact my peers is there's been a huge learning curve. We had to not only learn how to use the technology, but be secure and confident enough that we were going to be able to keep all of our information safe. So like, for example, if we were mediating right now, I would need to be able to guarantee that nobody else was going to have access to this information.
Yep. So let's talk more about that, because that's another theme that we have seen a lot, right? I don't know how many folks like you and other people on the call have heard this idea that my business doesn't work unless it's in person, right? Like that's a theme, and one of the things, one of the reasons why we're doing these interviews and these webinars is because, people are finding ways around it. In my industry, it's the same thing. I mean, my business is built on face-to-face contact, and it's really hard to do that without being able to see somebody, and it's not impossible. So for us, we have to find new ways to do that. So when we talked initially, you were doing some interesting things there. Let's kind of talk about what has worked, like things that you've done, and say, hey, I have to operate in this new way. I have to protect my clients' data. I have to protect their security. I also have to find a way to interact with them and bond with them. And then, so tell me what's been working there and what hasn't been working there.
So from a client perspective, as far as getting to bond with them, I have people who need to trust me with their most precious things, right? Their deepest, darkest secrets and their children. And it's really hard to be vulnerable over a phone or a screen. And so one of the things that I did is I went out and I decided I need to be vulnerable too. That doesn't mean that I went out and shared my entire personal story, but I did start networking on social media, and I've never been like a huge believer in like the influencer kind of like generation where like you make money that way. I'm a little bit traditional in the fact that you go and get an education and then you like move on to the next thing. And so for me, that was a vulnerable place. I joined a lot of Facebook groups and I started giving a lot of advice for free. Not only advice around family mediation, just around negotiations and period, how to rephrase something, write it a little bit differently, be a little bit more open. Kind of that power of reverse psychology as far as helping small business owners and even families kind of navigate the parenting exchange and the fear behind having a divorce placed on hold. And so I did share some of my personal stories, but what I did start doing is giving a lot of my time away for free, putting myself out there publicly and not charging for it. It's paid back tenfold. For every live that I did, I probably had about 30 people logging on and asking a lot of questions, but my inbox filled up with about 5 messages and at least one person turned into a client. And so I gave a lot of that skill away, but these are people who probably wouldn't have been able to have it anyway. They wouldn't have been in my practice because they couldn't have afforded the service. So I was able to put it out there and help the community and these families kind of maneuver a challenging time. And in addition to, I started getting messages saying a friend of mine saw something that you put on Facebook, or a friend of mine watched your video and they gave me your information. Can I schedule an appointment?
Yeah, I want to reinforce that again with everybody, that this idea that you being there for people at times like these, it will pay dividends down the road, right? Like this is a strange time for everybody, right? In Naomi's case, a lot of her business just can't be done because courts and things are on hold, or there are administrative blocks that are stopping progress, right? And you all have your own story there. But this idea that giving something away for free, I encourage everybody not to think of it as just giving your service away for free and it never coming back to you. I mean, not only are you building this idea of goodwill in the community, but people will remember you. 5 months from now, a year from now, they're going to remember, hey, there was somebody doing something good. There was somebody taking the initiative, taking an extra step, putting themselves out there and doing something other than nothing really to help the community. So I definitely, I encourage everybody to find those ways in your own business that you can give a little something out and be memorable and be present and be there for people in ways that you've never had before. So Naomi, you shared, I think you were talking about Facebook Live. That's kind of presenting to a Facebook audience, and that seems to have worked well for you. What maybe wasn't so effective, or you wish you hadn't spent so much time on?
So one of the things I probably wish is, vetting the groups, like really vetting where I was investing my time. Once I thought work in one group, I'm like, I'm going to join 10. Like, I'll do this all day if I don't have business. And so what I really should have done is found my niche and then vetted what I was doing. So like, for example, there are groups out there that they all present themselves similarly, but if you actually scroll down and read the content, you might not belong in that group. Like I ended up in one that said it was like a divorce and separation group, but really looking at it now, they're all just trying to date each other, for lack of a better term. So I probably don't belong there. But there are, so really vetting the audience that I'm going to offer my time to, because ultimately it's not unlimited.
Sure. And if you spend a lot of time on Facebook, is there a particular platform that maybe you might say, hey, spend more time here, because it's been a little bit more easy to vet those groups? I mean, is there anything there that you've noticed?
That one, I feel it's trial and error. I think when you scroll down for about a few days worth, you get a feel whether or not you want to invest your time into that group of people. Not to sound judgmental, but it gives you a general idea of the way the group operates. And I think that that's where I made my first mistake. It's like, oh my gosh, like this is working in this one, it's going to work in the other. The second one for me is I work in a very guided arena, if you will. And so I have been extremely successful with single moms because I'm a woman. And so like they let me in just because they're single mom groups. I have attempted to try and like explain myself, like say I'm not there to spy, those types of things with the single dads, and they're like not having me for a hot minute. And I probably spent about a day or two trying to just like infiltrate. And I had to know like where the boundaries were, and that like it's just an untrusting time in their lives. And so having this stranger say like, I'm going to give you free advice, like sometimes people don't, and you have to respect that boundary.
Yeah, and there will be lots of quick learning, right? I think we're all doing new stuff. Yep, we're all finding new ways, and the our learning curve. I think you mentioned the concept of learning curve earlier. It's going to be steep. I think hopefully circling back to the topic of resilience, this is a way for everybody to be resilient right now, is to learn a new skill. Right? We talk about this a lot at my firm, where it's like you're faced this all the time and you don't think about it, right? Like little challenges, you learn a little something every day, and especially as small business owners, you all have seen incredibly new challenges every day, but you don't think about them. It's just another thing you got to do, and you overcome it and you move on. And now we're just faced with this monumental, game change. But the reality is, we all have the tools and skills to be resilient, right? I mean, you shifted gears and started working on social media and doing things you've never done before and finding ways to make it work. And we've heard this story from the fellow at Brews Brewing. Like we hear this story over and over again. So I hope that that's starting to resonate with you folks out there. There are ways to do it. And if you need help, don't hesitate to ask people like Naomi. They've got great advice. They've done it. You don't have to reinvent the wheel here. There's definite ways you guys can do it. So now that we've talked about what life is like now, let's look ahead to the future, right? Like we're gonna pull out of this eventually. We're already starting to see signs of things coming back to normal, at least around the Metro Denver area. So I want to say that with a grain of salt, like not normal, but there's a lot more cars on the road than there were last week. But let's talk about where we're gonna go from here. So now that this thaw is happening, what's your plan to get back to normal?
Well, so one of the first things I did, which I didn't mention earlier, is my landlord is also a local business owner, and I feel like we were in it together. And so there was a negotiation of terms on my lease. Financially and fiscally, it would have been smarter to kill the lease, but that would have hurt a business. And so, you know, I put myself out there. It wasn't in a threatening way. It was more like, I love this space and I want to be a part of it, and I want to be a part of this community when this is all done, because I believe it's going to end. But in the meantime, we have to figure something else out. I do want a space to go back to. So what my future looks like for me, right now, courts are still doing telephonic hearings. I'm going to watch what they do. When they start letting people into a courtroom, that's probably time for me to start letting people into my office. And so Monday, fingers crossed, the doors are going to open back up, meaning that business is going to start operating at a fairly like normal pace compared to what it was before. They're still on a telephonic hearing. So for me, it's watching my industry and being aware of what's happening around me. As my peers and the courts start going back into effect, where we're interacting as human beings again in person and shaking hands, then that's when I will invite the community back into my office. It's also being very self-aware about what my clients do as a profession. I can't be 6 feet away from my clients. That would be impossible. We'd be like yelling across the room. That kind of mitigates what we're trying to do. So knowing what their professions are. If there's someone who works from home, it's probably safe for them to come into my office. If there's someone who, like fire and police, that where they're working with the public and they're being exposed every day, it's probably a better idea to stick with Zoom.
Sure. Yep, I love it. You're thinking of a lot of aspects, a safety aspect, community aspect. You know, those are the right things I think to be considering, and at least to have a concept of, hey, when the restrictions do lift, you know, I'm ready to move, I'm ready to expand, I'm ready to kind of jump back into it. I love it. What advice do you have for other small businesses in the area?
Don't be afraid to ask. Definitely look at the way you're going to approach. Like, you need to come with an open mind and a friendly attitude, but don't be afraid to ask. I think people are, especially right now, like they're dealing with their own uncertainty and the fear of losing you as a tenant or a business partner or something like that. Their fear is as equal as you not being able to provide whatever it was that you were providing to them on a normal contractual basis. I think right now is the best time to amend agreements temporarily. Also, don't take advantage of the situation. If you have it and you're able to do it, then remember that you're working with other unless you're working in a corporate industry, but this platform is geared towards small business, you're ultimately feeding an economy of small business. So don't be afraid to ask when you need it, but don't take advantage of it either, so that when you come out of this, you have great relationships.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's the flip side of what we talked about earlier in the call, which is, you know, when you put yourself out there and you build those bridges now, they come back and pay dividends. But people don't forget, you know, if you are, you know, this is a time to be overwhelmingly positive, right? This is a time to be generous. This is a time to be empathetic, and this is a time to do what you can in any way you can to help other people. Because, like you said, this is a community, right? That's why the SBDC is here, because we know that people in the community can help each other, we can help in the community, and we want to make the impact that we can right here. And that, I think, you know, that message, I don't want that message to get lost in everything else, because, you know, you know, it takes a village, they say, you know, and that's kind of where we're at. So the rising tide will lift all boats. I got a million of these things I could go on and on, but the idea is that, you know, we are really all stronger together. Yes, that's another one for an even hat trick. But, you know, we're working like this and being empathetic and reaching out to other business owners, talking with them, you know, negotiating with them in a way so that it's not a zero-sum game, right? It's something that where everybody can have success together in really the only ways we can have success at a time like this. So I'm so glad you mentioned that. I really appreciate that sentiment, because I think other business owners want to know that there is help out there, and they just maybe, you know, don't be afraid to ask, folks. Just pick up the phone, send an email, reach out and see what happens, see what shakes loose. So let's do this. Angela, we're getting kind of towards the end here. I want to make sure that we leave space in the webinar for any questions that might have come through. So tell us, what have you got?
Yeah, so if anyone wants to ask any questions of Naomi or Adrian, just type them in the question box. And a few things that came up for me that I wanted to ask you, which I was really struck by how you refer to your relationship with your landlord, and how, speaking to Adrian's point about empathy and viewing that this person is in the same situation that you are, they have a small business, et cetera. And in our consulting, we were getting calls about some business owners who were nervous about trying to make a call to the bank to renegotiate short-term debt, or a landlord. Is there anything that you might offer in terms of tips of ways that someone, when they're looking at a difficult conversation ahead of them, that they can kind of psych themselves up or prepare themselves for being open, rather than kind of viewing it as adversarial before the conversation even begins?
Yes. So my best piece of advice with that is try to, I think sometimes we forget, right? We're so scared about what's going to happen with us and our situation that we forget, whether it's a corporation or a small business, that they're people too. And there's an expectation based on what's being put out on the media or what we've overheard or someone else's story. There's an expectation that that should be the same for you. And so my advice would be is to really approach it in a positive, unentitled way. Like, you would really be helping me if we work together. Empowering them to want to help you instead of saying, I need you to do this for me. It's all about the power of the words and the approach that you take with them. It's something that it's what I do for a living. There's 10 different ways to say one sentiment. And so one of the things is everyone has a desire to help deep down inside. And so when you approach it that there's a need from them by you, and that they could really help you be successful, there are a lot of other options out there. My landlord's not the only person I negotiated with, but there are some places where like terms were just killed for me pending me calling them back. And it was more about like, tell me what I need to do in order to receive help. Or how do I be better? Or what can I do to stay current? Or those types of things. And most people, when I asked that open-ended question, most people told me what they were willing to do, and it far exceeded what I needed in some cases or what I wanted.
Wow, there's a lesson there of just, going back to your point about vulnerability. So being vulnerable to the outcome, right? And really letting go of expectations. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about that point, because your job in and of itself is a very demanding, emotionally demanding job, right? You're often at people's worst times in their lives. They're terrified of losing children, money, etc. And so is there a way, given the innate nature of your job coupled with this crisis, that you have been able to keep your tank full? That you have been able to really, self-care, I guess, is the way, kind of the conversation that's been coming up in all of our meetings. So I'm curious what you've done to support yourself.
So one of the reasons why we moved my office out of my house is I will not stop working. Like, if it's available, I will work and work and work until I fall asleep. Like, I will take your call at 9 o'clock at night because your crisis is far more important than my downtime. And it happened as soon as my office came back home, like it started back up. And being self-aware, I teach mediation, and I tell my mediators that the best mediators are the most self-aware of what their weakness is. And being, kind of reminding myself that I have to be self-aware that I don't need to work 24 hours a day for my business to be successful. It's okay to have boundaries, and scheduling time off. So one of the things is adaptability. People who are essential workers, the biggest fear is having to take time off right now to do something. So changing my hours to be more adaptable to my clientele. If they need to meet at 6 o'clock, that's okay. I won't work till 10 the next day. and kind of knowing what my caseload is going to look like. I think this is different for every industry, but if I have a really heavy caseload on Monday, I probably need at least the morning off on Tuesday. And that's how I keep my tank full. For example, and sometimes I don't have an option. I get a subpoena and I just don't have a choice. Last week I testified from the bottom of a rock. I decided that I was going to take Friday off and I was going to go rock climbing because that's my self-care and that's the way I kind of like deal with it. Especially now, the conflict has definitely been a lot more intense, but on Thursday night before I closed business, I was subpoenaed. And so I didn't have a choice. I had to call in, but that was okay because it was 15 minutes of a day that I scheduled for myself.
Wow. So you were between a rock and a hard spot.
Literally.
So adding to your metaphor list, Adrian, the king of metaphors over there. So unless anybody has any other questions, I just wanted to ask you, Naomi, how people can get in touch with you, find out more. You mentioned you were doing some Facebook Live. Were they presentations? What kind of are you teaching? Like, what are you doing out there?
So you can visit www.boylanmediation.com. That's the way to always get a hold of me. It links right into my calendar. If you want to talk to me, schedule an appointment. It's not going to charge you. I teach through the Colorado Mediation Group as a nationally certified mediator trainer. The two Facebook groups that I run, I decided to open them are, oh gosh, I have to look up their names. I will post them on Boylan Mediation, but it's Single Moms and Dads of Colorado, and they're gender specific because of that, like, untrusting, someone's going to look at what I'm doing type scenario. And please ask to join them. Like, we don't turn anyone away unless you're breaking the rules. And that's where the Facebook Lives happen. I post everything that I receive in those groups from the Supreme Court or the Colorado Bar. If when other states started ruling on time sharing and COVID-19 and Colorado hadn't had an opinion yet, I posted those other states' opinions because those were pioneers in that situation. So anytime I come across a legal opinion that's going to form case law, I definitely put it there because there's been a lot of questions about, you know, restricting parenting time, how parents are going to share children, and then the stimulus check. That thing was my nemesis, how to break out and share that money in the middle of a divorce. So any kind of resources that I get, I make sure they're in there. I don't think that people should have to scour the internet or pay someone for something that I can give for free.
Awesome. And we do have a question that came through. So do you have any tips for business owners for managing uncertainty/anger over not knowing what's going to happen, such as, will my business be allowed to open or not? Will I get a loan or not? So really navigating this terrain of uncertainty, what would you offer?
So the final, I think Adrian, I was an accountant before I was a mediator, is I took a look at the big picture, how much money is going out and how much of that really does need to go out. Not only did I do it in my business, I did it in my own personal finances. And I told the kids we're on a Corona budget. And so that immediately alleviated a lot of pressure because there was places where we just didn't need to spend money. Secondly, as far as like recognizing and acknowledging the fact that you're scared and angry, anger comes from fear. So acknowledge the fear and do as much as you can to plan around it. Like, I'm a huge advocate of lists and outlines. Like, I outline your mediation before you ever see me on like where I think you're going to agree and where I don't. Start an outline. What's going to be the easiest place to start down to the hardest, and just start ticking it off as you go. And as those ticks come, there is a level of pressure and a level of fear that is lifted, and that fear kind of, it's empowering because you start to feel like, I can do this. Was I scared? Absolutely. Am I still scared? 100%. Could the Supreme Court by Friday make a decision that they're not going to reopen? Yes. But are there other opportunities? Yes. I also think that as professionals, we sometimes get stuck in the rut of doing what we know. I never done parental supervision before COVID-19, but there's an absolute shortage for it. And And so I put it out there that as a non-mental health provider, I would be willing to monitor that and dedicate that time. It's not a huge earner. It's $40, or $45 is like the average. But I added it to my my repertoire of things that I'm willing to do through this process. And so, you know, really evaluating your skill set. Are you just doing what you're really, really good at? And do you have other skills that you just haven't used in a really long time? And can you add that into your practice?
Great, awesome. Well, thank you so much, and great responses. There's you know, analytical side, which can allay fears, which I think you point to is just getting things out on paper and acknowledging the truth of what you're afraid of and what the reality of your situation is. Denial can take up a big amount of real estate, you know, in our psyches for sure. So, John posted your website in the chat block, so if folks wanted to take a look at your work and sign up for one of those sessions. And I wanted to just let Adrian close it out and talk a little bit about, and so just thank you so much, Naomi. I really appreciate everything that you had to say. I think it's really certainly helpful. And Adrian, you might speak just a bit. We do have a Talking Business next Wednesday with John Jaggers, one of our lead consultants, and he'll be talking with Paul Beyer of Dale's Meats out of Brighton. So he does dried jerky, etc. So a very different kind of a product and challenge from the conversation today, but in a similar vein of navigating the unknown, right? So I'm going to sign off now. And Adrian, if you want to just close out and maybe say a little bit about your upcoming program on May the 28th. So thank you, Naomi.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Angela. And yeah, I highly encourage everybody to attend next week's, because you know that is going to be a very interesting. There's a good story there that I think a lot of you will get some value out of. So I want to close it off. There's a few things I just wanted to mention, kind of tied to this concept of a growth mindset, right? The theme of these webinars is resilience, and you know there are tons of books right now being read about the power of a growth mindset with kids and how it impacts their learning. But I want to apply that to the broader context, right? We're getting questions even right now about, you know, how do I overcome the anger and the uncertainty? And there's a couple things that I just wrote down. I want people to take home with them today and think about. One is that idea of doing something that makes you uncomfortable every day, right? That's a way that you can personally grow, and you don't have to be good at this thing that you tried. You know, it can be a scary thing, but every time you do it, every time you push yourself a little bit, it gets a little easier. So that's just something that can stay with you all of your life, to say, hey, if I'm interested in being better at overcoming challenges, you have to challenge yourself. So that's one thing. And then there's the idea of the power of the word yet, right? When you're not good at something, you're not good at something yet, right? Maybe I'm not so good at social media yet. So tack the word yet on there every time you think about things that you're not good at yet, right? And the last thing is, and Naomi already said this, I think Angela said it, but focus on the things that you can control, right? That's a way you can get your hands around a big problem. Is some of that stuff, you know, Naomi can't control when the courts open back up. That's completely out of her control. But she can control what she does every day to meet clients, right? So the lesson there is, you know, if you're getting frustrated, if you're angry, boil it down to those things that you can control and do your best to control them. So anyway, thank you everybody for joining. Naomi, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. And I will just keep it. Everybody log in and stay on tune with the SBDC website. I've got a seminar coming up in about a week and a half, where I'll be presenting some very specific guidance tools and tips for small business owners from a financial standpoint. So I think there will be a lot of interesting stuff. It's very timely right now because there is so much uncertainty with the market. So I encourage everybody to check that out. And if you're interested, please sign up for that. So yeah, thank you very much. Take care, everybody, and we'll see you again next week.